Welcome to Marketing Mindshare, the podcast that brings you into the world of the top marketing minds from Fortune 500 companies to scrappy small and medium-sized business marketers. Together, we'll explore the leading strategies today's marketing leaders deploy. I'm your host, Dean DeCarlo, and now let me take you into the Marketing Mindshare. All right, welcome Ron Ladouceur to the first episode of Marketing Mindshare, and thank you for agreeing to be my guest today. So welcome to the show.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So Ron, you're definitely a mentor to me. You're a great marketing practitioner, somewhat of a legend in advertising, I would say, in the upstate region because of your experience. And you're an educator too. I think that you inspire thousands of marketers probably that are passing through the UAlbany system. Maybe not thousands yet, depending on how long you've been there, but definitely from everyone that I've talked to, you've been a huge inspiration. So I'm really excited to have you on the show.
Well, Dean, it's clear that I've taught you a bit about marketing, at least hyperbole with that introduction. Thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so the reason we started the show Marketing Mindshare is because we want to bring the brightest minds in marketing to show how small and medium-sized businesses can compete with large businesses too. Because the way that large businesses do advertising and marketing, it's down to a science. It's very intentional. And there's a lot of lessons that could be learned. So what we're doing is we're bringing on agency leaders like yourself. We are bringing on marketing colleagues that I have that work for Fortune 500 companies and even colleagues that are working at some of the hottest startups. So I thought you'd be a great intro to Marketing Mindshare, especially around the world of branding and advertising, because that's really what your background is. So can we talk a little bit about because you have experience working with Fortune 500 companies, what are the big guys doing that makes the brand experience different from what smaller competitors doing? Like, what does that look like from a branding perspective?
Well, the big guys have a lot of money, right? So they're able to, and they have a lot of bureaucracy and they have a lot of, kind of rule boundness, which benefits them in some ways when it comes to branding, because they can throw money at the problem and they can take their time and they can repeat the message over and over again. So when they establish a logo, for example, it's not a brand, it's the mark for the brand. But, once they establish that, they can set rules and make sure that that logo is used over and over and over again. You see it all the time. It's on every car that you drive and every booklet, if you're buying a car, and every ad for that car. And the rules set around it are really fixed. And the bureaucracy behind it, in order to make it, be right every time, is really fixed. However, that's also the big brand's Achilles heel.
I was going to say, don't you feel like that's changing in the age of social media where it's so dominant, where the challenge that came out 2 weeks ago on TikTok now is completely old and there's two more challenges?
Absolutely. There are advantages to being a big brand. There are advantages to having, 10,000 employees that are supporting that brand. But now you are definitely a battleship that's tough to turn when things change. And things right at the moment are changing rapidly, as you point out, week by week, day by day, hour by hour. And a large corporation simply is too big to move at the speed that a small company or a small advertising agency would insist that they move. So consequently, they're struggling against the assault by smaller businesses.
So it's more of an opportunity for smaller businesses because they can be more nimble.
Smaller businesses and smaller agencies. So the term is challenger brands and challenger agencies. And if those two institutions kind of understand a little bit what the opportunities are, what the new rules are, they can do some real damage to large brands.
And if you're running a small, medium-sized business, you're positioning yourselves to be one of these challenger brands. Is there a rule book that they should be following when they're branding? If let's just say I own a donut shop and my exit strategy is that I want Dunkin' Donuts to buy me out. From a branding perspective, do you think Dunkin' Donuts is looking for a certain a certain angle that we're taking, a certain experience, or do you think that they're buying us because we're essentially maybe doing really well in the social space or going really viral and have a great subscription model? Like, what do you think that these brands need to do to position themselves for an exit?
I'm not quite sure of the question, but if we're talking about Dunkin' Donuts and how a small agency could attach themselves to Dunkin' Donuts, yes, I think you'd want to go after an angle a big agency would probably struggle in order to satisfy. A lot of people talk about, well, I'll handle your social, or I'll handle some of your more aggressive, more taboo oriented marketing, and you'll have a little bit of distance between that and the parent brand, and you can get away with some more stuff and maybe try some, crazy TikTok stuff, maybe, just pushing the boundaries a little bit in terms of, what's proper, what's politically correct. And you can get a lot of play if you do that. I think though, if you're a small entrepreneur, or if you're an entrepreneur looking to get into business, you don't start with the marketing. You start with the product. You start with the business model, and you try to find a product and business model that will be naturally socially viral. And there are lots of examples, and you may remember some, from the class we shared. There's a sex products brand in Burlington, Vermont, called Sustain Natural, which built its brand around the idea that in social space, in digital space, you can be a lot more provocative. You can say things that you can't say with a point of sale sign in CVS. Right. You can say things like "think with your vagina," which has been their tagline, since they started. Obviously, though, that causes its own problems because you can't put that sign up in CVS. And so if you're trying to grow that brand beyond the initial stage, then you start running into some issues. But there are a number of brands out there. Goldie Blocks is another one I know we covered in class, which is a product that's on an engineering toy for girls. And they spotted the market opportunity and the social cause, which was marketing to girls, who were underserved in terms of their capacity to be engineers. So they said, there's an opportunity. Let's build a product around that. And then let's go to market by talking about this cause, the cause being girls underserved, female empowerment. Buy this toy for your niece and you'll be happy. And over again. And, lots of smaller brands have constructed the product first, aware that it's going to move into social space. The best example of this, very intentional brand called Shinola, which is a watch brand out of Detroit, ostensibly. And it was founded by the billionaire founder of Fossil watches.
Okay.
And so, but he was like, I'm not going to just throw money at this problem. I'm going to create a brand from the ground up that ties in all of the social issues and all of the social causes I can possibly pack into a single brand. So the social causes there were bringing manufacturing back to America, bringing manufacturing jobs back to the inner city. And so they built a factory, which actually was just a watch assembly floor in one of the old Ford buildings in Detroit. And marketed the whole thing as a restoration of, sort of American ingenuity, even though all the parts for the watch are coming from Switzerland. And the only thing that's actually happening in Detroit is a couple of technicians are assembling the parts and creating the watch. They were able to create this story that both Bill Clinton and Barack Obama visited this factory, showed their watches as they walked out the door. The marketing around this, the press they get for this product is all about how great it is that, African Americans are assembling watches in Detroit. And they're just, they've ticked all the boxes of social cause. And you can look at it and go, it's completely artificial. It's totally constructed from the ground up, but it's constructed, in a way that we almost can't dislike because it's ticking so many boxes, and it generates press and it generates brand loyalty because you're not just buying a cool looking watch. You're buying a watch that tells everybody that you support, American manufacturing, and you support Black Lives Matter, and you support American ingenuity, and you support restoration of American values, all wrapped up in a $800 watch.
Right, right.
That costs $150 to manufacture.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the power of branding, though, right?
Well, yeah, but let's talk about what branding is, because you started with this question, right? About what is branding? And branding is definitely changed. Do you mind me just going on here?
Yeah, please go on.
Branding. I know we're going to look at some logos at the end of this little.
We are.
We're going to look at GM. GM being a good example, of a brand that used to just throw money at the problem. And I don't know when you grew up, but I grew up in the core of the crappy car era, 1970s, and the GM products that were coming off the line were just terrible, right? But there was no sense of how you were going to, improve that. How could that be better? And the Japanese came in at the time. It was the Japanese. Later on, it was the Koreans came in and started doing a much better job building a quality car that was a little bit cheaper. And GM didn't know it hit it, because it thought the marketing made the product, but people were experiencing the product. And when they experienced the product, they were rolling down the windows, because back in the old days, you remember, we used to roll down our windows, not push the little button to take the window down. You'd roll down your window and the handle would break off, as you were rolling down the window.
Right.
And you were like, this sucks. This product has no quality. Take that, add all of the internet conversation we can have now, add all of the experience you can have with a brand digitally now. And suddenly the branding and the product and the experience of enjoying the product, the experience of buying the product, the experience of, talking about the product, all of that is totally wrapped together. Brand right now is not the outbound marketing face of a company. It's a combination of that plus the experience of actually using the product or service.
So that's what. So it's safe to say then GM probably would have had a hard time surviving today if this were the case. If they were to have that same line of product now, the way that it came out in, I'm guessing 70s or 80s, and they would have got destroyed. The Twitter world would have absolutely destroyed them if they came out with a product like that.
Exactly. And American brands are still facing kind of a quality control problem relative to right now the main competitor being the Korean cars. The Korean cars are coming out with their, Kia and the other brands are coming out with great electric cars right now, and GM is in catch-up mode, but they're aware, right now that the product, the experience of the product needs to match or not be so disassociated from the marketing of the product. And I think for a challenger agency like yourself, the opportunity is to, move what you do for a client past simply promoting it and into product development, into product design, into product experience. A lot of that's like web experience, or the other digital experiences. You can, even get into interface design. IXIO or IOX. I never know which way that goes. So I think it's become both an opportunity and frankly a requirement that a marketing agency not stop at the promotion of a brand, but move right in, before even promoting the brand, the design of the product, and after the promotion of the brand, the experience of the product.
If those things line up, we find, at least at our agency, that the marketing, no matter how much money you put into promoting it, as soon as they get to, let's say it starts at the website page, right? Because even if you're going to buy a car, you're going to start off at the site. If something doesn't excite them there, if it doesn't communicate the value of the product, we see that they never book the time with the dealership. They never click the add to cart button. So experience is like paramount right now. And a lot of people miss that. They think, oh, I'm on Instagram, on Facebook. Like Instagram and Facebook alone, like those platforms are 12, really like 12 years old from an advertising standpoint, maybe 10 years. So like they're mature platforms. People realize that the level, just to stay on par with what people expect, it's not here, it's here. right? And that's a very hard thing to get across for challenger brands anyway, that you really, your customers, they do not expect subpar experiences. They loathe them, they won't accept them, and they'll find the direct consumer brand or the challenger brand that is doing proper UX UI design, is giving them a product where the box is nicely branded and the experience feels premium, has the story of purpose. So we definitely see that in the advertising that we're doing.
Yeah, you see one of the like hottest promotional vehicles for brands is the customer created unboxing video, online, so brands like Glossier, the cosmetics brand,
Yeah.
Has just exploded, really taken the cosmetics industry by storm. And one of the things that they show over and over again are customers unboxing the Glossier, makeup kit that they've just purchased, and they put stickers in it, and they put, the tubes of makeup all look like, paint tubes, and there is an experience in unboxing it. This goes back to Apple, which was the king of the, packaging. Before anybody got into it, they were into packaging, and people would post videos of, opening up their, right. But now it's common, and it is a good example of what you were just talking about, which is you need to care about the optics of the thing all the way through, and also because there's so much digital interaction now with almost every brand, whether you're B2B manufacturing all the way up to consumer products, and many consumer products are actually delivered digitally. Somebody needs to be looking at the marketing aspect of that all the way up. Do you remember we talked about a guy in class named George Lois? He's a creative director. He's a crusty old creative director, swears like a sailor.
Yeah.
He's from the 60s, right? He was a partner with the guy that made the Think Small Volkswagen ad, very famous. He said, even in the 60s, he said, don't give me a shitty product to promote.
Right.
Because I'll promote it and put you right out of business. Because I'll get people to experience your product. They'll try it. They'll say, this is shit. And you're done. You can never recover from that. Now it's critical. And I think, to the point of this podcast, it's opportunity for marketers to slide themselves into spaces that they weren't allowed to be in before.
Yeah. And it's interesting. Marketing, the job of a marketer, I think, is much harder than it was even 20 years ago. Because to your point, like the person that has to take this from marketing to product to feedback, that's a product marketing manager now, right? Like SaaS companies are completely filled with them. And the product marketing manager, they're responsible for almost everything under the sun when it comes to experience, because they have to be able to promote, they have to be a copywriter, they have to be a content creator, they have to be a paid media strategist in terms of placing the ad, and then getting all the feedback and looping it back into the engineering teams, the product teams, whatever that looks like, just to optimize the experience. So it's really interesting what marketers, they have to be very nimble now. They have to understand that there's a lot of opportunity, but that comes with a lot of work to be done.
Yes, honestly, I don't know how to bridge it. I don't know how to bridge being a challenger agency working for challenger brands to being a corporate agency working for corporate brands. There is just this gulf between those two things that at the moment, I'm not seeing a lot of successful bridging. I look at the Superbowl ads that just ran last weekend, right?
$5.5 million ads now, which, by the way, when I was in your class 6 or 7 years ago, they were a record 3.5. So I don't know what's going on with inflation, but on one of the lowest rating Super Bowls, that was this year, and then the one in 2008, I think they still got $5.5 million 30-second ad. Crazy. Had to throw that out there.
Yeah, and they're one after another. I mean, I read about how people felt about the ads. They reviewed them and they would rank them. That one was funny, and this one was less funny, and this one was not funny at all, and this one. But it is just a tired medium. Everything is so predictable. I mean, I was watching those ads and going, okay, we're going to, have an assortment of stars from the 80s or stars from the 90s. It all feels really, kind of tired and retro to me. And it's what big agencies still do. The gold trophy is, do you get a spot on the Super Bowl? And that almost is, for certain brands like, crap foods like Doritos, or everyman beer like Budweiser, those are, it's good. You want everybody, and you want everybody that's not that critical of, a Doritos is not going to be high on anybody's list of gourmet food.
There's part of me that wonder if the large agencies push the Super Bowl spot because it helps them get the cans.
Absolutely.
It helps them get their awards, right?
Because that's what they do. I mean, if I look at Super Bowl spots with my background in corporate marketing, right, I see just creative directors talking to each other, hardly even aware of the audience they're talking to.
Oftentimes, that's interesting. So you mean conversations almost happening internally? Yes. About maybe who has the best ideas, and then let's insert a product into this to
maybe, yes,
stroke my ego kind of thing. Is that how it actually works?
I think it just suggests a very insulated world. I mean, from being on the ground and working for small brands, or working for up and coming brands, working for entrepreneurs, working for owner operators. I mean, you are on the line to actually move the needle. Relative, they're spending money, right?
If we don't perform, we're out.
You're out, right? Out. And that direct connection breaks once you get to the corporate world, and then suddenly the people that are in the corporation and the people that are in the advertising agency have a completely different set of what qualifies as a success, and the finance guys are going, what the hell are you guys doing? Because you're running, it's just spent $5.5 million and I don't see an uptick in sales.
Right.
And the people in the marketing department are going, we got great ratings on our Super Bowl ad, and so we win, now I can get a budget for next year. And the agency people are going, we got an ad in the Super Bowl. And nobody cares that it didn't move the sales needle.
Do you think brands, even large brands, are starting to question the value of the Super Bowl ad? Because you mentioned Budweiser before, but Budweiser didn't even have a spot. Anheuser-Busch I saw a small 15-second spot where they put all of their brands around the Anheuser-Busch parent company logo. But do you think that they're starting to question and say, are Super Bowl ads even worth it?
Well, I mean, the Super Bowl, though it was low rated this year, still drags a lot of eyeballs to the screen. It's one of the few venues we have left. It's one of the few national moments we have left. Back when I was a kid, we all watched the same 3 television channels and we all watched the most popular shows. And so you could guarantee a lot of eyeballs. But right now the media space is so fractured, and the younger you get, and you get down to the demographic everybody wants, something in the 20s to 30s, I mean, our media world, I mean, who watches television? I'm 62 and I don't even have television.
Right.
I watch this, or I watch, streaming, that's what I do.
Exactly.
So Super Bowl is still a thing. It still drags in a lot of eyeballs, but come on. First of all, who can afford it?
Right. So you think it's almost properly rated, or do you think it's still overhyped?
Well, you do get a lot of ancillary benefit from having a Super Bowl spot, because right now people watch the Super Bowl spots before the Super Bowl, because they're all published, or, teasers are published, and then it's talked about after. So there's a lot of added value. And when you are a big agency and you are a good media buyer and you buy Super Bowl, you're also buying a lot of, secondary spots, so you're getting a lot of value, and they're not stupid. They're packaging that value, but it doesn't work for almost any other brand except for big commodity brands or a few breakout brands. I mean, we see Squarespace using the Super Bowl for the last couple of years now, right?
Yeah. They had the Dolly ad.
Yes. Right.
Yeah.
Working 5 to 9 now.
Working 5. Yep.
Right. And I think it goes over the heads of most people. I think most people watching the Super Bowl are like, what the hell was that? Dolly Parton sounds really old all of a sudden. I'm not quite sure what that was. But if you try to reverse engineer it, what they were trying to do was they were trying to go after this group of professional women who have all been consigned to being, grade school teachers for their children during COVID, and are going, my corporate my corporate ladder has just lost a couple of rungs and I'm going to have a hard time climbing up. And you'll notice that the people featured in that spot are women who are going to go into business for themselves using the Squarespace platform. Now, I think that's a great angle, actually, going after women who, now have the tools to be entrepreneurs, now have the tools to be business owners. I mean, that's great business because I think there's a lot of women who are in that space right now. And it's also it's a great social cause because you can package this up as female empowerment, so you can get a lot of energy. But why you would then blow $5.5 million on a fairly opaque, Super Bowl ad is a little beyond me, although I could defend it, but you don't see much of that. You see, like I said, you see Cheetos, you see Doritos, you see soda, you see M&Ms, you see beer. It's all these big consumer brands. How many of those are you working for?
Not many. We have one Fortune 500 company right now. Other than that, and they don't advertise like that. That's not how they'd even advertise, and they have the money to do it, but it wouldn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense. What I tell my students these days, you probably didn't benefit from this because it's taken me a while to kind of get my noodle around it. But you remember the final project in our class, you were supposed to pitch a brand. And about half of the class will say, even to this day at the end, that the way they're going to get their client business is by, quote unquote, using social media. And I keep saying that doesn't make any sense. You can't use social media in the same way you can use broadcast media. Social media is it's a critically important, totally game-changing way of consuming anything, any media. But you can't just have a Facebook page and expect your business to grow.
Definitely not.
You need a story. And what I tell students now more directly is the revolution is not social media. The revolution is cheap, targetable media. So you can not use Facebook, but you can buy Facebook and target, a very narrow demographic in a very, and you can depend on Facebook's artificial intelligence to go find somebody who is in this very tiny niche and blast an ad at them, right? And then get them to convert right there and then and move over and become a customer. That's the revolution. I mean, it used to be, even in a regional agency like the one I worked for, you would need to have a major presence in the marketplace. You would need $1 million to start. With
right.
Media and creative, and to just make any noise in DMA the size of the capital region in New York State.
Right.
You would need $1 million, and if you didn't have that, then you had to do stupid junky stuff. But now, I don't know how about you. I don't have a client with $1 million media budget, and I'm quite the successful little small advertising agency with clients with way more modest budgets than that. Sometimes not $1 million, not 100,000, but tens of thousands. And suddenly
it could be effective, right? Because you could use the tens of thousands of dollars into a few zip codes, and it means a lot because everyone looks at this now. So absolutely.
It's targetable media. That's the cheap targetable media is the revolution. And then the great advantage for somebody like you and me is the management of what is now a really complicated media space. It used to be I made a Super Bowl spot, I put it in a Super Bowl, and I can rest for a couple of months until such time as we talk about next year's Super Bowl spot.
Yeah.
What rest do you get?
Not much anymore. We're changing on a weekly or daily basis depending on the spend. If you have a budget where you're spending like $10,000 a month, you better believe you're making daily changes.
Yeah.
In the Facebook space and in the Instagram space and even Google, because it's all data.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it's constant. And for somebody to use social media, it's possible to do it without media spends. There are great companies. I'm going to give an example of a company on Long Island called My Cookie Dealer.
Okay.
They create half-pound cookies. They exclusively advertise on Instagram. The videos are just them opening up these half-pound cookies, and it's gooey inside. It's amazing. 250,000 followers, and they were on the news the other day, so now they're getting a ton of earned media. They're doing something like 30,000 cookies a day. 2 years ago, the founder was just like this bodybuilder guy, and his wife would just make these cookies after his bodybuilding competition. Now they're this massive cookie brand. I
Sure.
would imagine they're getting eyed up by a few companies saying, hey, how do we get in on this? Or how do we buy them? But it's insane.
Yep.
And I don't think that they spend $1 on paid media, but if they're going to take it to that next level now, you have your organic content. Now you have to start thinking about, how do we start placing ads in different spots? How do we get onto different social media platforms? Because let's say the algorithm changes tomorrow in Instagram, your 30,000 cookie a day business all of a sudden might go to 15, might go to 10. The 50 employees you have might get cut in half. So, I mean, that's a huge problem. So you do need paid media, but managing that is really complex. It's not an easy task.
No question. No question. And it's both that the algorithm might change on you, and it does all the time. Consumer tastes might change on you, but the cookie brand is a good example of, they probably stumbled into it being, like a great brand for Instagram.
Yeah.
But there are plenty of businesses right now that are thinking consciously about, how do I make my brand kind of socially relevant and socially viral before I even design the product. So you're building a product around a story that you believe will, like Shinola, the watch brand I was talking about.
Right.
You're constructing it so that it has the capacity for a lot of share, a lot of earned media. And then, if you want to cross the famous chasm, in the product adoption curve, you need to move out of what is natural and organic into, paid and, intentional. And if you create a brand that's got too much, it's too taboo oriented, like it's, all about thinking with your vagina, you have a hard time actually crossing that chasm. But if we look at a brand like Glossier, which didn't run the taboo, it instead ran sort of the authentic angle, and that I'm here in the bathroom of some, semi-famous person, Ariana Huffington, and I'm looking at her makeup, ritual, and I'm looking inside her medicine cabinet and seeing what kinds of brands she's got there. And you're a voyeur inside that, and there's some celebrity association with that, and it's feeling very authentic and natural, and you're inviting your users to participate in that. And you can move from there more easily across the chasm into paid space, because you haven't created a brand that's so dangerous that it can't be.
It almost sounds like there could be a cap if you're too niche with the brand position, right? It could be the difference between maybe doing 10 million a year, which is it's a good sized brand, but it might be the difference between doing 10 million and 200 million. If you can't cross that space, if you can't put a billboard up that's as provocative, right?
Right. Exactly right. Yep. So you can launch a brand provocatively, but then or you can, I mean, it doesn't always have to be provocative to launch a brand in new space. It just needs to, I mean, that's why we see female empowerment used over and over and over again. Even Glossier, to a degree, is saying, we're girls taking control of our own makeup experience, and I'm, unmaking up, and I'm not, not buying into, the corporate view that, that one of the major brands is trying to make me so pretty. Instead, I can be natural. So there's that. Goldie Blocks, like we said, I mean, who's going to argue, about girls being engineers, that some girls should be engineers and should have a toy that supports that. There's, it sounds like a social cause, but everybody goes, of course, no problem. If you go more provocative and you start, talking about, sex positivity and, well, you can really launch a brand quick because it's like fun to talk about sex, but you run into that limit when you try to cross the chasm, it's hard to get into the mainstream, with something that's so kind of initially provocative. So we're seeing that challenge, that some brands are able to cross that chasm and others are kind of stuck at $10 million, like you said, but good money. Got it.
Yeah, absolutely. Super interesting perspective. Okay, so now I want to talk a little bit about the founders of branding and advertising. Obviously, we have titans of industry. Right now, Gary Vaynerchuk is the titan of social media, the pioneer. Before him, Ogilvy, Sorrell, all of these legends in marketing. But there was one guy who did it way before Ogilvy, maybe 100 years before him. This
Dean, who are you talking?
almost. I'm talking about P.T. Barnum, and I
Okay.
need to know what is the deal with P.T. Barnum. Who is he? Because nobody has, I guarantee you, nobody who is listening to this has ever even heard of this guy. Besides that, he has a really great circus that he started, and maybe they've been there and they've seen that.
Sure. I mean, everybody knows Barnum and Bailey.
Yes.
But you're right. Very few people know that the Barnum is P.T. Barnum. Although there was a movie, right, just a couple of years ago, The Greatest Showman,
Right.
which has ticked up people's awareness of P.T. Barnum a little bit. Now, who is that? Hugh Jackman? I mean,
yes. Yeah. And he's the man. He's Wolverine. So
yes, right. So you get that, but the movie, though, I have to be honest with you, I haven't seen it. I know from reading about it, isn't exactly the P.T. Barnum story for real. Now, I think the interesting, so P.T. Barnum because I teach P.T. Barnum.
Of course.
Right. And I think he's very relevant to marketing right now. I think he is actually the master of how one does marketing since 2009, since the advent of the iPhone, since Twitter. P.T. Barnum got his start. Do you remember the first thing he did the first show he promoted? Do you remember?
Was it newspaper?
Well, the vehicle was newspaper because so
which and this is like the 1800s or
let's get our bearings. P.T. Barnum is really a man who lives during the 19th century. He's like born in, I've forgotten exactly, 1810, dies 1891. You can check me on Wikipedia for those dates.
Okay. We won't fact check you here. You're good.
Yeah. But there is a very important thing that happens in the United States in the 1830s. What is it? Like back in class, I'm asking you again.
The printing press, right?
The printing press. Well, kind of more broadly, the Industrial Revolution in the U.S.
Okay.
And what happens in 1835? In 1835, somebody, I forgot the guy's name, but basically decides he's going to stop selling newspapers for 7 cents, 8 cents, or 9 cents a copy. Two people who are looking at the shipping schedules or looking at the stock prices. Basically, newspapers were imagined to be a media for business people and wealthy people, because who else would need all of this detailed information? So this guy who was the publisher of the New York Sun decided he was going to sell his newspaper for a penny. It's called the penny press. So in 1835, he starts promoting the paper as a penny paper, and he starts bringing in all kinds of lurid content. He starts talking, court reports, and prostitutes getting beaten by their johns, and kind of scandalous murders, and all of this stuff gets stuffed, and people love it. The American public is just dying for scandal and something tawdry to entertain themselves, because also with the Industrial Revolution, you have really boring work. Suddenly you're working in factories and doing, this all day long, repeated motion all day long, and your life is gray, and you're going to go, I need some entertainment. So you start reading this really scandal. First thing they publish is something called the Great Moon Hoax. There's a book on this called The Moon and the Sun, referencing the New York Sun. And it was supposedly about this great big telescope that was in South Africa that was able to see these walking upright beavers on the moon, and men and women with wings, and
absolutely wild
stuff. People
the first Netflix pretty much of its style, right? I mean, it's the equivalent of what Netflix is now.
Absolutely, and so P.T. Barnum in 1835 goes to Maryland and rents or buys a woman by the name of Joyce Heth. She's 80 years old. She's a slave. Now, P.T. Barnum's from New York. And if you know your New York State history, New York outlawed slavery in 1827.
Okay.
So they outlawed it earlier and grandfathered in. So the last slave was released from bondage in 1827. Nonetheless, P.T. Barnum could still go to Maryland, which was still a slave state in 1835, pick up a woman, buy her contract from her quote unquote manager, who was actually her owner, and he promoted her in the New York Sun in 1835 as the 161-year-old nursemaid to George Washington. So she was kind of a grizzled, skinny, old black woman. P.T. Barnum got her drunk one night, took out all her teeth, so she looked even older.
Oh my gosh.
Oh yeah, no, he's a character.
He's not a good guy then.
He's it depends on the moment. Depends on how you're what lens you're looking at him through. Okay.
Right.
So anyway, it's a huge hit. So this woman evidently is a natural storyteller. She can't walk. They wheel her out in a wheelchair onto stage. And people are told in the advertisements that she's the 161-year-old nursemaid to George Washington. And even in 1835, nobody really believes that. But it's a great story, and I'm going to go hear the woman tell these stories. And half the audience is like looking at her going, this is a trick. I know this. She can't possibly be that old. And as a matter of fact, stories develop that she's not even really a woman, that she's an automaton, a robot, so that story develops. And P.T. Barnum brilliantly starts taking advantage of that. He starts writing letters to the paper, not under his own name, but under an assumed name, saying, I think the woman's an automaton. You need to go to the show and judge for yourself whether she's real. I don't think she's real. I want your opinion. So he got more people to go to the show,
He's being a troll. You're right. He's the first online troll without being online, just doing a letter.
You're picking up on the whole thing here. So we've got this penny press, which is really the internet of its day. I think that's the closest thing. It is no longer rule bound. It's not appealing to an audience that is business people. It doesn't have to, kind of pretend it's an all classy thing. It's looking, it's appealing to the mass audience, and the mass audience doesn't care about your class signals. It wants to be entertained with, boxing. It wants to be entertained with crime stories. It wants to be entertained with these fictions that P.T. Barnum is putting forward. Is it a fiction? Yes. Is it a hoax? Then we start, is it a con? Is it P.T. Barnum called them harmless humbugs? He also did another thing famous called the Fiji Mermaid, which was a piece of a fish sewed, the back end of a fish sewed to the front end of a monkey, and he promoted it as a mermaid, kind of a desiccated dead mermaid. And he did the same thing, he put pictures in the paper. He actually put pictures in the paper, engravings of very comely bare-breasted mermaids. So in 1835, you're seeing bare breasts in the newspaper, and you're going, this is going to be kind of cool to go see.
Right.
When you go see it, and it's this desiccated monkey fish thing. But nobody complains. Not a single person complains about this. They all love the show. And P.T. Barnum is like, what I've discovered is that people who are living these gray lives, in the Industrial Revolution or out in a farm just doing the same damn thing day after day, need some gaiety in their life. They need some release from the boringness of the whole thing. And so they will come to my show. And it's made possible because there is this total breakdown in the rules for media. So you have the penny press that's just pouring, content out, and you have industrial paper production and industrial printing. And suddenly, like any guardrails that held content in place just get exploded. Now, how much like recent history is that? Right? I mean,
it's almost like Instagram marketing. I mean, that the product, they always have the models, whether male or female, always good looking, always using a product, always with the BMW, the Mercedes. And at the end of the day, it's just, everybody can't afford that. And you shouldn't even want to afford that to some degree because you don't need it in your life, but you go after it, right? Yep. And of course, you're going to be happy once you get it. But at the end of the day, it's built on a fakeness,
Yeah, but P.T. Barnum would tell you that he was a minister. He was charged by the Almighty himself to create these entertainments, and we look at him and go, my God, he like bought a woman,
right.
Or he promoted these beautiful bare-breasted mermaids, but they turned out to be desiccated fish people. Or he promoted an African American man as the what is it, in his circus sideshow, saying, is he a monkey? Is he a man? You come and decide for yourself. And we look at this through our 20th century lens and go, yuck.
Absolutely.
This isn't right. And he did all kinds of stuff that, we would look at right now and go, that's bad, except we're doing it all over again.
Right. The processes of the concepts of how he advertised
Yep.
his products.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And again, it's because the guardrails are blown out. When mass media was the way to communicate. Okay. So TV stations, outdoor newspapers, magazines. Okay. We didn't have the internet. So this is only 20 years ago, right? 30 years ago. There were guardrails because those mass media were in front of a mass audience, and there were children and families, and the government was involved, and there were all kinds of rules of propriety. You couldn't say things that were provocative. You couldn't do stuff that was too politically incorrect because it was, it ruined the image of the network itself.
Right.
And now, you know,
Doesn't
now,
matter.
now Facebook goes, it's not my fault if somebody's posting scandalous information on the channel. We're just the medium. It's their fault, And now we're kind of hitting the end of the no guardrail period right now.
Oh, for sure. Yeah,
right?
I think even this week, and this is the week of where it's February 13th right now, 2021. I think that they said they're going to start looking into political posts and maybe suppressing them.
Right.
So it's interesting. We're going to see how that develops.
Yeah, it was all fun and games until, people smeared excrement on the walls of the Capitol.
Exactly.
Tried to execute, Nancy Pelosi. It's like, oh, maybe words have consequences.
Right.
Okay. The Republican defenders say, it's free speech, whatever. Regardless, the guardrails are becoming, are growing back a little bit. Like you can't, we've had a bunch of cases of YouTube stars going too far.
Oh yeah.
And going to discovering people hanging in Japanese forests.
Yep, the Logan brothers.
The Logan brothers, right? And PewDiePie is like the breakout top rated YouTube star, but they tried to make a deal between him and Disney through like a Google intermediary, and Disney took one look at his content and said,
not happening.
We're not associating with that brand, right? So, and then in the world of influencer marketing, which I know is critical to you now, critical to
absolutely.
me, critical to everybody. What we're seeing is the maturity of influencer marketing into just a paid media channel. It's no longer the Wild West, right?
Yeah, definitely not. I mean, from an influencer standpoint, it's great for building brands, but it's becoming, in a way, like a Super Bowl spot. Influencers can be really expensive. They can cost you between $5-10 grand a month, upwards of that for the really huge ones. I mean, but even
for a tweet,
yeah, for sure. And at the end of the day, it's really hard to measure what the impact is. We're using more affiliates now, where we say, hey, listen, you have 20,000 followers. We will give you free product. We will sponsor you, but you're going to have a unique code. And if your followers convert over, they make a sale. So let's say I'm selling a shoe. Your followers buy a shoe with your code or your link, then we'll give you a commission. But it's very interesting. It's that divide. I think, it's not, influencer marketing isn't that shiny thing. The $1 billion brands have been like Gymshark. They've been built already.
Yes.
So now it's becoming a pay to play kind of game.
It is. I mean, again, it's the maturity of the thing. I mean, it took 35 years during P.T. Barnum's era to go from 1835 to 1870. And he had it was Wild West for that whole 35-year period.
Right.
I would say it's been Wild West, for us, probably certainly since the time of the iPhone, but definitely since the time of Twitter. Since the advent of Twitter, all the rules broke down. People like Donald Trump figured out how they could game Twitter, become president of the United States, with nothing but provocative earned media. But again, that's a good example of, hitting some walls and people needing to say, you can't be just Wild West. We need to have some rules. And also marketers need some predictability. They need some way to, it can't be all just crazy because I can't work in this environment.
Yeah, exactly. The crazy's not going to stop. I'll tell you that much. The crazy's not going to stop. I think it's getting harder to be especially in the paid world, paid media world and social media marketing, it's getting harder.
In what way is it getting harder?
Well, with iOS 14, they're basically allowing you can't even do cookie tracking anymore, right? So privacy is becoming a bigger conversation, as it should, but marketers need to be aware that our jobs are going to get harder. And to some degree, the consumers' lives, like, I'm going to start getting ads for things that don't even apply to me, like women's skincare products, because maybe my phone can't track me properly, right? So it's going to be interesting for the next year to see like what the right balance of privacy and also personalization, going back to what we were talking about experience, looks like.
Sure.
But it's interesting. It's getting, in a way, we're trying to have predictability, but right now, from at least social media, Facebook, Instagram, it is anything but that right now. It's complete chaos. And it's been the talk for the last 4 months at our agency. So it'll be interesting to see how,
I mean, who amongst us doesn't want more privacy? I mean, we all personally, don't want to be tracked. We don't want, we don't want the government or L'Oreal or anybody else knowing what we're doing every moment of the day, except when we're marketers. And then we're like, oh, that's really cool. I like,
exactly.
Just don't track me. I talk about it as the angel on one shoulder and the devil on the other shoulder, and so a lot of the class that I now teach is about ethics, kind of incidentally, but we're all in an ethical quandary every day. It's like, what constitutes going too far? But we're beginning to see kind of a broad set of social rules develop, I think. After the Wild West era of the last 10 years, some rules are beginning to develop, like that's gone too far, or even that doesn't work because it hits a barrier. And so we're seeing some advantage there. I'm not so worried as you are, but I'm also living not quite as close to the ground in terms of digital media as you are. I'm not quite so concerned about the loss of trackability or loss of targetability. It might not be quite as precise. Facebook's been a miracle in terms of being able to, find an audience that's interested in your product.
Yep.
And some of that starts going away. Okay. I don't think it's ever going to go away to the degree where I need to start broadcasting again. I'll be still narrowcasting. And
I think it's going to wind up being fine. I think the next few months are just going to be adjusting. But in marketing, we're always doing that. This is just a bigger shift than what we're used to.
Yeah, sure. And when it comes to search, we've never cared. I mean, it's all intent marketing anyway, so people, we don't need to track people. They track themselves. We don't need to identify people. They're self-identifying, and so I know you guys prioritize search, kind of above almost everything oftentimes. And I think correctly, because, that's, you got somebody if they've searched for you,
Absolutely.
10 steps.
And to that note, basically, how search is being affected is, as search as we know it so far, I think will remain intact, but where it was going will look different. If you're kind of noticing, like in the last few years, like Google has a really great way of predicting what you're going to search, not just in finishing your sentence, but let's just say yesterday you looked up most popular fish, and then the next day you do recipes for. What it will actually do is look at, it will bring that in now. So the predictability is changing. So that's going to remain intact. I think it's still going to be highly effective, but how it advances, that will be affected by privacy. But it's yin and yang to me. Like I'm a consumer too. I want to have privacy. I also don't want ads that are completely not relevant to me, like very off base, but we'll see. Okay, so let me just turn my camera back on, and then we're going to get to the last segment here, which is the hot or not. It's going over the brands and getting your perspective as a branding expert on who has really nailed their rebrand and who has completely just tanked.
Not done so good. All right, let's do it.
Okay. So first brand we have is GM. So GM, I think the idea here is that they are looking to go into the electric revolution. But what do you think about this this rebrand?
I think it's great. This, at first I'm like a little shocked because every time something that classic changes, you go, what have they done? What have they done? They've gone lowercase more or less here, which signals friendliness. And they've taken that underline that you see under the M, and they're using that in all their promotion for the basic technology that they're building their electric car. So that's the platform for the electric car. And they've come out this week and announced this whole movement towards electric car. And even the kind of goofy shininess of that blue around that logo, I think speaks electricity. So I think they've done a good job with this.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree with that one for sure.
Yeah.
All right. Next brand we have Burger King.
Who the hell cares?
Why do you say that?
Okay, I mean that new logo is, first of all, their old logo.
That's what I heard. So this is a retro logo.
It's a retro logo
back now, right?
This like, there's no question they should run away from the 1980s 1990s Starstruck logo that they had, right?
Right.
It's just right out of first generation computer graphics, 3 dimensions. It's just awful on so many different levels. But the new one is the old one, and it just says this is a brand really afraid of making any change and being anything other than it is, and we're just going to commit to irrelevance for the rest of our journey. How about you?
Perfect. I love it. That's a good summary right there. So Kia.
Yes.
And this brand was, when I looked at this, I thought this was more of a change even than GM.
Yes.
So I had to put a logo of one of their concept, a showing of one of their concept cars, because I really couldn't even picture this logo.
Sure. Well, you have to admit the old logo had to go away. It's cheesy as all get out.
Of course.
I mean, I don't know who did that, but it's a terrible logo. And the new one, it's funny because the logo on the car is a little different than the logo above. The logo on the car separates the letters a little bit, whereas the logo.
Yeah, you're right.
The
key, all the letters in Kia seem to be a little separated.
Yeah, a little separated. The new logo I played with this morning. I don't know if I'll send it to you. I think it's just a little wrong, but it's mostly right. I think they're on the right track. They have a little problem with legibility.
I agree with that. I think the key is really hard to make out. I think it looks kind of cool when you see it on this futuristic car.
Yes. I mean, the brand is, from a design perspective, the product branding is just first class now. I mean, that Kia car is a cool looking car, you have to admit.
I agree.
You slap that old logo on it and you've just brought it down, 20 years. It's terrible. They needed to do something. It's not quite there, but it's darn close, but the K is a tough letter. It's called the leg.
Okay.
That part of the K that goes down.
Yeah.
With the part of the K that goes down, if you look at the rest of the logo, it's really, you could read it upside down the same way you could read it right side up. But that K stops your eye. So you're going zip down and then up, and it's like, okay. And then it creates that big weird triangle negative space between the K and the I. And that's just stopping me. Now, this morning, all I did was thicken the leg slightly to the left. I'll show it to you sometime. So just
that'd be great to see.
And it made the K more legible, and it stopped it from stopping your eye. So I'll give that to Kia for free.
Okay, sounds good.
So you like this logo or not?
So I definitely agree with you. From the Kia's old logo to me looks super old. I associate Kia with not a quality car.
Sure.
My dad used to have a Kia for like 3 years. It was like one of his beater cars. Eventually got into an accident. Guy was lucky to even make it out alive. I mean, this thing was a cube by the time he was out of this car accident. So more experience on my end. I've just never associated it with that quality. But this, I gotta say, like, it looks super cool. It looks futuristic. So there's something about it. I'm not sure if I'm going to buy it, but you know what? I'm definitely going to look twice.
Yeah.
When I see this car on the street.
My brother-in-law works for the New York State Automobile Dealers Association. And Kia and Hyundai are brands that they're really surprised by. Those two brands have just, moved upwards in terms of quality, but in terms of styling, just, and
I will admit that too, for sure, for Kia and even Hyundai. I mean, they spun off Genesis to that luxury line. I mean, Genesis are beautiful cars. So
So they're in the right direction. It's a little trouble from we call in typography ligature perspective. That's where characters touch.
Yeah.
The I and the A are fine, but that K has got some problems. Just minor though. I think they're in the right track.
Awesome. Okay, so the next logo we have is Blue Point Brewing Company. This is a Long Island company, but they were bought by Anheuser-Busch. This was Anheuser-Busch's.
Anheuser.
Yes. I'm sorry. Yes. So this is one of the first craft breweries that they brought, and now this brand is everywhere. Uh-huh. And what's funny is they didn't.
You're Long Island, so what do you think of this?
So I was a fan of their old logo, but when you start thinking about the COVID-19 and what has it done, people don't drink in bars anymore. At least in New York, it's really not happening. So where do people get beers? They get beers on these things on your phone. Again, keep going back to this on apps like Drizzle.
Yep.
The original Blue Point logo, although I love it, it screams Long Island. It is so hard to read on their website. It's so hard to read on digital. Where Blue Point, I feel like it's easy to read on digital. But what's as the expert brainer, like, what do you think?
I don't know yet. I mean, I'd have to see this in application. I'm regarding the one on the left, the original logo. I am just sick and tired of that, that bad printing, that bad letterpress look. I see it just in every logo, which is, the inking, because we're not inking anything. It's just this, it says, aren't we authentic? Aren't we old? Aren't we, turn of the last century? And that's all fine. I'm fine, but I think it's just been beaten to death. Every craft brewery to a degree has that thing. Every craft coffee shop has that like bad inking look to it. And people still love it, but it's going to go away. And I think you're right, in digital space, it doesn't translate. But I don't know about that diagonal. I mean, I know they're trying to echo that, that buoy, right?
I agree with that. I think this is a pure digital play.
Yeah.
Honestly, I get where you're coming from.
They're playing with the authenticity, with the brewing co, with this like, I gather that's a longe latitude out there, and there's, some kind of, isn't this nautical, old-fashioned kind of thing. So I get that. I'm a little troubled by how big the O is relative to the rest of it, but I'm not sure it needed
the notice that until you pointed that out, but that is
every other letter is really vertical. If you look at it, it's got the big up. But maybe that should have been the focus of this logo. That diagonal is very strong, but it's in typography, it's like almost another letter form. It's like almost another I in there. It's too much like the letters. But I'll reserve judgment. They may be onto something. They may, it's got some good qualities to it. Did it need the diagonal at all? I don't know, but they were trying, echoing the old logo. So, so I'll say, definitely got it's an update. We'll give it.
Okay, that. Perfect. Then we'll put it out the hot for now rating, but we have to see where they're going to go with it. I'm going to send you their Instagram and some of that stuff, because I think maybe that will move the needle.
I could see it being strong. I could see it being used, even the diagonal, I can see them using that in a way that would make that whole logo pop for sure.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. So now we have Petco.
What have they done to my logo?
Yeah. What's going on here?
They're from what I read, Petco is trying to be this kind of wellness company, not just, so I don't know if it's just pet wellness, but it just says wellness. Now there's the whole movement over the last 20 years, which is pets are people too. And so many Gen Xers and millennials are adopting pets as surrogate children, and treating pets as if they're family members. So this play to be more of a wellness company for pets, or just even a wellness company, and maybe it's pets and maybe it's people. I don't know. I don't know where they're going with that, but that might be kind of revolutionary, because we are treating our animals as people. Pets are people too, but there's just something so damn adorable about that original cat and dog. And
I gotta say, I think this new Petco logo, I mean, is it me or does it look like Casper? I feel like they copied Casper,
Yeah,
right? This just doesn't mean anything to me. That's mine, but that's my opinion.
I know that their long-term brand supporters hate the new logo. They hate the loss of the cat and dog. They're but and it's just boring.
Yeah, it's a thumbs down for me for sure. Okay, now we have our next logo, highly controversial, the Aunt Jemima brand. So Aunt Jemima brand is now the Pearl Milling Company.
Yes. Well, they had no
Thoughts
choice.
on this?
Lots of thoughts on this. How deeply do you want me to go? I mean, I wrote a paper last year called The Rise of White Flour, which was published to the SCA Journal. And it talks about this really critical transition in branding and marketing that happened, say, 1890 to 1910. Where that's when we see the emergence of national branding for the first time. I don't know if you remember from class, maybe I wasn't even teaching it at the time. There was something called the Unita biscuit. You remember the Unita biscuit? Did we ever talk about that?
Yeah, I do remember that.
It was the first product of the Nabisco company. It was called the National Biscuit Company. And it was the first product that had kind of, well, that wasn't the first product that had a standardized logo. Those really are tobacco brands like Mail Pouch, et cetera. But it was the first brand that had a national advertising campaign, and they had the same color scheme, the same logo, on all their products. And it was breakthrough. They spent $7 million in 1900 to promote this cracker. Now, they didn't have a spokesperson or whatever we want to call the Aunt Jemima character. They didn't have a character associated with that. Some of the other flour brands though did, and there was one called Imperial Flour that used what is called. So Aunt Jemima is called the mammy trope. So it's this black slave maid, and that trope, that image was actually used to promote a lot of different products over the years, and it settled on Aunt Jemima. And then there's something called the Tom trope, which you've probably seen if you've ever seen Uncle Ben's Rice.
Yeah.
There's this butler now, but he was originally more a slave. Or Cream of Wheat. Are you familiar with Cream of Wheat?
Yeah, I am. Both the brands I'm familiar with for sure.
Yeah. The Cream of Wheat uses a character named Rastus, which is a black cook. He's got a big cook's hat on. Mm-hmm. And so those brands, Rastus, Uncle Ben, and Aunt Jemima, survived right up until what? Black Lives Matter.
Right.
And now we look at them and go, what the F are you doing?
Right.
I mean, now I have a book here. It's called Slave in a Box.
Okay.
It was written, it's pretty old now, 1998, written by a woman named M.M. Manning. And it talks about the history of this mark or these marks, Aunt Jemima, as being part of this whole mythology of the lost cause. You familiar with that phrase?
No. Why don't you explain it?
So I'll try to be brief here.
Okay.
The lost cause is how the South reimagined what the Civil War was about.
Okay.
Rather than it being a defense of slavery, which is what it was, it became a defense of states' rights, and it became a defense of this kind of old South culture. And as part of that, they created these tropes. They created these images. One of them was the happy black maid. If you've ever seen the movie Gone with the Wind,
mm-hmm.
And the mammy character, I don't know nothing about birth and no babies, famously, she's the classic example of the house slave who was actually, before the Civil War, just perfectly happy serving their master, nursing the baby, and advertisers helped the South create this Edenic image of what the South was prior to the Civil War. This whole idea that, okay, maybe there was some abuse of slaves, but for the most part, everybody was happy. Everybody, served the masters in their house. Nobody complained. Jello used these images, and the other brands that we talked about used these images, and it became kind of a way to, as we moved into an era when we started cooking for ourselves and no longer had cooks in the house, and women, had convenience foods.
Mm-hmm.
You were able to say, but I've got a maid working for me. Her name is Aunt Jemima, so
Wow.
that's the nature of slave in a box, right? And I mean, I grew up with this. I remember during the 1960s that there were some protests about Aunt Jemima. And as a kid in the 1960s, I was like, what are you talking about? Who cares?
Right. But when you understand that background history, that's all the context you need right there.
Yeah. Now, with that, let's move to what the new, it's a terrible rebranding.
I mean, do you think it's a cop out?
They're trying to drag that imagery, that
Oh, completely. It's
forward.
They have put minimal effort into this rebrand.
They had to do something, but you can see why they resisted it so long, because that is a strong brand, Aunt Jemima, and it's impossible to carry forward after Black Lives Matter. You're just signaling that we don't care.
Right. It was the absolute last straw, probably decades overdue, but
they needed to go in a different direction. They needed to make a stronger new brand, and just go, instead of this kind of, we're just going to weaken everything about our old brand and call it our new brand.
Right. So it's just complete missed opportunity. Like, at least in my mind, and I don't know what the data is behind who really buys Aunt Jemima, what demographic that looks like.
Yeah.
But I mean, like, didn't they have the largest opportunity to get earned media, to really try to maybe even be the face of empowerment for people of color, for being a brand for everybody, for inclusivity? I mean, do you think that was even a conversation? Or
I'm sure it was one, and I could tell you had a bunch of mid-level marketing executives in a room at who's the parent brand for Aunt Jemima? Is it Pillsbury? I don't remember. You had a bunch of executives in the room, and they're all wringing their hands like this, like, because in the corporate world, we'll finish on this. In the corporate world, you're too nervous about your job, which is a very good job. You're making $150,000 a year, and the only thing you need to do to ensure that you're going to make $150,000 next year is not screw up. And so
not have a decrease in sales.
Yeah, or no, just I'm not going to do anything that anybody's going to notice, because I want my budget to be, transferred over next year, and I want all of my staff to still be in place, and I can't shake it up. To do anything other than this would be to take a risk and shake things up and put into risk my entire happy corporate life, and so this is why new brands and challenger brands have an opportunity, because what have they got to lose? They could come out with a brand new pancake mix that, is the Black Lives Matter pancake mix, and have at it, and I think right now a challenger brand coming after the pancake world has a great opportunity to put
absolutely
Aunt Jemima out of business.
Absolutely. There's a huge opportunity here. So I think we are both in agreement. Pearl Milling Company, absolute disaster, terrible brand, big thumbs down.
Big thumbs down. All right.
So Ron, thank you again. Obviously your perspective as the founder and principal of Post Marketing, as the professor of branding and advertising at the University at Albany, it's a really unique perspective for us. And I just appreciate you coming on and just talking with me about so many different topics on branding and advertising.
Thank you, Dean. It was very enjoyable.
Thanks. And if you are listening for the first time, we are a brand new podcast, so be sure to subscribe. If you're on Spotify, if you are on Apple Podcasts, or anywhere else this is being put out, just hit that subscribe button. If you want to hear about anything on branding, feel free to reach out to us, or feel free to, Ron, where can people contact you?
You can contact me at my website, postmarketing.com, POSTMKTG.com.
Perfect. You heard it here first, and looking forward to seeing you guys on the next Marketing Mindshare episode.